Ruchem Abo M'Shem Hashem. Shem Irgen Shir Yitter. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Rabbi Yakov Zev Smith Shlita and Hagdoras Dun Klei Suda Gabet Tevillas Keilim. Contemporary Tevillas Keilim issues. Congratulations for sponsoring a shir. Please call Irgen Shir Yitter at 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Rav Smith.
This time of the year we prepare for Pesach. We hear these shilas about Tevillas Keilim. I was collecting a few of them and it turned into really a full shir. Someone bought a new easy filter, the covered Pesach, which typically you screw onto the faucet and it keeps out the bugs. And you want to know if you're chayiv in tevila. Interesting question. Someone asked me, he bought a meat thermometer, which I wasn't familiar what it is, but basically they have a thermometer, you stick it into the roast, and you can measure the temperature. So it shouldn't burn, it shouldn't dry. Is that chayiv in tevila? Someone bought for Yom Tov a new Keilim. As we'll soon see, not everything in Eretz Yisrael is made in Eretz Yisrael. It has to be made by a Jewish company, and assuming it's a Goyish company. The toivel Keilim. And before long, we had quite a long list of what we call contemporary questions. Most of them are new questions that are not found in Shulchan Aruch. But I want to just, before we begin, to make one point very clear. Not every keli is chayiv and tevila because it really depends on the material that it's made from. The chiyuv of tevilas kelim is on the sheish matchis, as we know, metal, gold, silver, or glass. A glass keli is chayiv midrabanan. Many items today are really plastic. So we're saying it once and for all. We're talking today when the material is chayiv and tevila. Wood is potter from tevila, plastic is potter. So if I say l'mashal the word strainer, I mean a metal strainer, not a plastic. So to save time, we'll say it once and for all. We're talking about that the material is chayiv. The question is the function. Is a meat thermometer chayiv and tevila? Is an easy filter? It's the right material, but the question is the function. So to make the question a little more geschmack, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah Daf Ayin Hey Amud Beis, which is the Yesod of Tilchas Tevillas Keilim, the Gemara points out something that's very important to realize. Tevillas Keilim has nothing to do with a tray for keli, because in Midyan they first kashered it, and now it's 100% kosher, and then they toiveled it. So Tevillas Keilim has nothing to do with kashrus per se, and therefore Zok the Gemara, even a new keli, you buy a new pot, that's not treif, you have to toivel it. Why? Because it's a goyish keli. Oh. So based on that, the Gemara asks the question, since even a kosher keli is chayiv and tevila, for the Gemara, even a scissors should also be chayiv. The Gemara, I feel zuza de tasarbala, Zok Rashi, misparayim shegoyiz membege, big day tzema. You should even have to toivel a regular scissor, regular hammer. And for the Gemara, no, it can't be. Why not? This is probably the most important words for today. You look at in the case of Midyan, it was kli suda. It was plates and cups and cutlery. Zok the Gemara, the only chiyuv tefillah is kli suda. It has to be used in conjunction with a meal. So therefore, a scissor, a hammer, is not chayiv and tefillah, even though it's metal. So those two words, kli suda, as we'll see, is probably the most important words for today. Rashi explains that even though typically you have to kasher something before you toivel it, but slav dafka, even a new keli, but it has to be a kli suda. Now our question is, what about an easy filter? What about a meat thermometer? Is that considered kli suda? So we'll get a good start from the Shach in our simon today. Today is Kuf Chaf, Sif Kat Yud Aleph. The Shach says the following: in Mekadeyach shemenakfin boy barziyois hachaviyois ein tzarich tefila. Now Mekadeyach typically is something like a hammer, but you make a hole in the barrel, and that becomes your spout, or you put in a spout. Zok the Shach, a Mekadeyach. This type of hammer, you make a hole in the spout, in the barrel to make a spout. Ein tzarich tefila. Now the truth is, we don't have this exact thing today. We used to have something pretty similar. I don't see it around. A regular can opener today, we picture opening a can of tuna, you take off the cover. But not long ago, a can opener had a different function. You wanted to open a can of pineapple juice, a can. So you had a can opener that had a sharp edge, and you punctured 2 holes, and then you were able to pour from that can. So that's really a mekadeach. You're making a hole in a can. Zok the shach, that mekadeach is potter from tevila. The question is why? It's opening a can of food, and someone's even touched the food. So here we come to a big side. Let's say someone has mischievous children, and they always open the refrigerator. He wants to keep them out, so he puts on a lock on the refrigerator. Okay, understandable. Do you have to toivel the key that opens the lock? Sounds like a joke, right? But why not? You can't get to the food until you have a key. Teretz is, kli suda means it prepares the suda. It prepares the food. The key doesn't prepare the food. The key gives you access to the food. Zok teshach, that's why a can open, his type of can opener is part of tevila. It doesn't prepare the food. The food has an obstruction. It removes the obstruction. That's not chayiv and tevila. So this is basically the important shach. A can opener, to my knowledge, all poskim hold, is not chayiv and tevila. Now the emphasis is, we find lashon in Gemara that shmo kagorim. If you look at the lashon in English, at least, can opener, it's not a food opener. It's mishamish the can. I'm not bringing a big raya, but that's the yisoid. A can opener is mishamish the can, not the food. Now I must mention that the Shach himself points out the Maril in the Menhagim on the Tafkuf Tzadik Zayin says that we do toivel can openers. Okay. I looked it up in Maril. There's not much of a hezbah, but I imagine the svara is, I found Noyek Atzoin Yosef Amid Pei Zayin says this hezbah, and he says Maril holds any machshirei oichel is chayiv and tefillah. It's lav dafka, the actual preparation. Anything that facilitates achila is also chayiv and tefillah. So although we don't pass like the Maril, but at least we see an insight. Machshirei oichel is not chayiv and tefillah. We pass like the shach. What is chayiv? What prepares the food. I saw both Rabbi Yashiv and Rav Ozna that even if sometimes the can opener does touch the food, but it's still not a kli oichel. It's still not a kli suda. It's still not preparing the food. So that's klar. In fact, some say that our can opener, even Maril is moida, that you don't have to toivel it. Because our can opener typically doesn't touch the food. Okay. A nutcracker is fundamentally different. Because the nut consists of 2 parts. The shell and the nut. So you're really cracking the food itself. You're not cracking a can. Again, I'm not bringing it right from English, but nutcracker sounds like it's cracking the nut. The nut is the food. So nutcracker, you do toivel, can open or not. Apple cora takes out the center of the apple. Again, it's touching the food, it prepares the food, it makes it usable, and that's why a nutcracker an apple cora does need chiv tevila. Now I'm leaving out peeler because there are 2 types which you have to go for a different time, but basically it has to be a kli oichel, kli suda. Another good example for now, people have a metal, even a nice Shabbos trivet. You can't put the hot pot onto the table, so you put a trivet, a piece of metal on the bottom, and it looks nice, and you put the pot on top of it. That's not chayiv and tefillah, because it's not mishamish the oichel. The oichel is fine. It's basically protecting the tablecloth. It's used in conjunction with the suda, but that's not the criterion. It has to be something that prepares the food. Someone asked me, I wasn't familiar with what it is, but it's called a spoon rest. Basically, if you have different spoons being used by the table, and you don't want to put it down on the tablecloth, it gets dirty, so you put the spoon on the spoon rest. It's like a parking for the spoon. So again, this is not a kli suda. It's to protect the tablecloth. Even though it's metal or glass, makes no chilik. You look in the Gemara, I should mention this, it's lav dafka cooking utensil that's chayiv. Koisois, kitoiniois, tzluchiois, flasks, bottles. See, it's not cooking, but it's preparing. But lamaisa, a spoon rest is not at all preparing the food. Now, before we apply this more specifically, we have to learn one more very big yisoid. Imagine a shaykhit is starting off his profession, and he buys a new shchita knife. Now, we're talking about it was made by a guy. Okay? If you made by Yidden, fine. You have to toivel it. I'm talking about made by a guy. The question is, does he have to toivel the shchita knife? So you're wondering, what's the shaila? If you have a electric knife, for example, and a metal blade, so if you have to toivel the metal blade, you cut the roast not by the table. That's not nice. You cut it before Yom, before Shabbos. You slice it, and you never see that meat slice or that electric slicer. So why you chayiv? Teretz is pasha. What do you mean why you chayiv? It's preparing the food. You can't serve a big roast. You don't do it at the table. Who said that's the deciding factor? So we see, no doubt about it, a very sharp knife, electric knife, is chayiv and tevila because it's machshir the oichel. So now the question is, so why should a sakin shel shchita be different than any other knife that you cut the roast? And indeed, the Tashbitz cotton, one of the Rishonim, Siman Shin Chavav, says beferish, a sakin shel nachrim that you use for shchita, you must toivel before you use it. Makes a lot of sense. Big knife, small knife, what's the chilik? However, the Mordechai in Masech Techulin, actually the first page, Taf Kuf Ayin Zayin, sakin of a shchita does not require tevila. Why? Kli suda ksuvim beparsha, the sakin shel shchita lav kli suda. Why? And one of the reasons he says is because even after the shchita, you can't eat that geshacht in the behema. You can't eat a raw behema. It's full of blood, nachtetzu. So the Mordechai is using the word kli suda in a very, very important way. That a shchita knife, even though it checks the animal, but the meat can't be eaten after the preparation, that's not a kli suda. And this is a new expression of kli suda amur b'parsha. The Issa Veheta in Nun Ches Chav Dalet also says that a sakin shel shchita does not require tevila. So we have two examples that you're not chayiv in tevila. The can opener, and now the sakin shel shchita. Now, the question you might ask is, so if that's the case, why are chayiv to toivel a pot? Pots also cooks raw food. That's foolish, because it makes from raw to cooked. But a sakin shel shchita does not make it cooked. It just makes it kosher. And that's the shita of the Mordechai. That's pata from tevila. In Gansen, not even below bracha. Now the Maisa, the Chiddush is, the Tashbitz cotton holds, Yechayiv and tevila. And the Agoyis Issa Veheta, Asif Cotton Chav says, that according to this Tashbitz, you toivel it with a bracha. So you have two extremes. But what makes this much more important for us, the Issa Veheta continues. There are other examples that you pata from tevila. And one example is the needle that you sew the chicken. See, they used to make stuffing, kalacha. They would actually sew the chicken up, put the stuffing in the center and sew it up. The needle that you sew is not chayiv and tevila. He says, why? Because it's not a kli suda. A needle is not a kli suda. So he's making a chiluk. It depends how you identify it. And then the Issa Veheta adds, in the next Sif Pei Hey, and this is probably the most important yisoid for today, that Lamaisa, anything that you can eat after you prepare it, after you do that shimush, is not chayiv and tefila. For example, he says you skin the animals with a knife, part of them tefila. And then he adds, and this is the most important thing I think for today, Barzilim shemesaknem hem matzois, beloshen Ashkenaz shtufel eisen. We call it a radel. The person in the matzah bakery takes a radel, he's a radler, and he runs it over the raw dough to make holes in it. So matzah should not expand too much. Zokti is the this radel is not chayiv in tefila. Why not? It's very pashut. Because after you radel something, it's still not edible. So a radel is very similar to a sakin shel shchita. Pashut, beautiful. He gives a few other examples. A keilim, you cut the raw dough in the matzah bakery, or you make kreplach, you cut the dough for kreplach. The point is, if it's still raw, it's not a kli suda. As I halt, this is a beheta. Fine. I found a beautiful lush in the Chsam Soifa. The Chsam Soifa in the Agoy, Sif Cotton Hay. He says, what's the reason why some sheetas hold Yechayiv even on a shechita knife? We'll soon see the Rama holds Yechayiv. We saw the Taj holds Yechayiv. He says, because even though it's a tashmish to tashmish, it makes no difference. That's a beautiful word. I'll give you an example. We know that the tefillin zekel, Medina Gemara, is tashmishe kedusha. Because the tefillin zekel touches the tefillin. How about the plastic over the tefillin zekel? That's all tashmish to tashmish. That's already a watered down version of kedusha. So he's saying that the Cham Soif is using that word for our sugya. The sakin shel shchita is taka only step one, but it's something. So why can it be a chayiv and tefila? That's the Svarda Tashbetz. What did the Mordechai hold? Obviously, the Mordechai held it has to be something that prepares the food. It's not totally in Tashbet, it's totally in Kli Suda. If after you shech you can't yet eat it, that's not Kli Suda. How do we paskin? So I'm going to take the liberty of reading the Shulchan Aruch because it's extremely important to hear this point. The Mechaber holds sakin shel shchita ein tzarich tefila. Period. Not even beloy bracha. The Ramah adds v'yesh cholkin b'toiv l'toivloi beloy bracha. So a shchita knife needs tefila beloy bracha. So far so good. Then the Ramah adds habarzalim shemesaknim hem amatzois. If you have these radel, einam tzrichin tefila. As I sagt Ramah, you don't have to toivel the radel. Anything that seems wrong with this Ramah, I'll tell you what's wrong. Doesn't stim. The Ramah says you toivel a sakin shel shchita. Obviously, tashvet tashmish is chayiv. So why is the radel different? And this is the question that's probably the most important yisoid for today that impacts the most shilas. Zok the Taz, a simple teretz. And it's sort of a derech eretz of the Ramah, if I could use that term. Zok the Taz, the Ramah holds that even a radel is potter. Anything that has shaykh to food is, even a radel, is chayiv, meinich. But you know what he did? He gave each paisik their chance. Because the sakin shchita, Taj holds his chayiv. Then we saw the Mordechai holds his potter. Okay. So then the Ramah says, you hold it's chayiv, you hold it's potter, I hold it's chayiv. But the radel halacha was not found in the Mordechai or the earlier Rishonim. That was the Agoyis Yisabaheta. So that goes separate. Like first you do the Rishonim, and then you add your comment, and then he quoted the radel. But the Ramah felt you would understand. Just like I argue on the sakin shel shchita hold it's chayiv b'lei bracha, who adin radel. So basically, nothing changed. Radel is chayiv like the Ramah, just like sakin shel shchita. However, there is a shach. The shach Siv Cotton Yud has the same kasha, and I imagine he felt that the Taz's yisoid was a bit of a doichik. He says, he quotes chayiv, he quotes potter, and really chayiv. But the Shach makes a very important distinction. Look again at a sakin shel shchita and a radel, and you'll see the Shach's chilik. A sakin shel shchita is taka only for shoychtim, but it's a knife. It conceivably could be considered a kli suda. But a radel, no one ever brought a radel to his table or used it and anything but matzah. Zok Teshach, a radel that's not used in any other scenario is not a kli suda, and that's why it's potter. So in the Ramah, the Shach is saying a chilik. Shchita is like a chayiv b'lei bracha, because it's a sakin. Big, small, but sakin. But radel, even the Ramah holds is potter, which reads very nicely when you learn the Ramah. So these are the two shitas. Again, I think the Yisoid Adover is the word Kli Suda. Now, Lamaisa, the Shach sounds familiar. I mentioned earlier, that's really what the Isra B'Heta says. He says, a pin, a needle that you sew up chicken, that's not a Kli Suda. Lamaisa, you're sewing it, but it's too far removed from the concept of Kli Suda. So now we have the following. The Mechaber holds, Sagan Shechit is potter, and that's going to affect many halachas. The Ramah holds it's chayiv. But the question is, who do you pass, like shach or taz? Excellent question. A number of points go with the taz. That means anything that touches food is chayiv. A number of points go with the shach. So in Svara we would say, since the Ramah is not even arguing be'ikah on the Mechaber, he says v'toiv l'toivlei b'lei bracha. He's not saying it's chayiv mamish. So maybe Taka we could say, you have to be choishish. You go with the shach. That's something like mashal a radel or a sewing needle is going to be potter. But the minik seems to be, this you look around, that's the minik. Anything that touches the food and prepares the food should be toiveled b'lei bracha. In other words, a radel is chayiv and tevila, and something similar to that as well. But a mekel avad yeshal milismach. So now to apply this to the numerous shilas, let's see how much we can gain from one simple yisoid. Someone asked me, I don't see the shilah, but I'll mention it. He buys these very elegant napkin holders, napkin rings. It's a metal ring, you put the napkin in it, it looks nice on the table. You have to toivel that. So it's metal, but there's no shaykhis to Kli Suda. It might be on the table, and the napkin might be important and elegant, but there's no shaykhis to Kli Suda. Okay, more of a question. Someone has a sterno. Sterno, there's a little bottom that makes the fire. You have a pan with water that cooks the water, and the steam of the water cooks the food. So you have to toivel the sterno pan, a regular metal pan. You have to toivel that sterno pan. So you might say, why not? You're cooking water. But it's not true. You're not drinking the water. The water steam cooks the food. So how would you look at the sterno pan? It's something like a grate, maybe something like the fire, but it's not the food. So although you need that water, but you can't say that the pan is considered the kli oichel. Now I want to add a little more geschmack to this psak. I think it's a right way of looking at it. The place can discuss what's called an immersion heater. You don't see it that often, but it's good for a traveler. Basically, it's a metal, it looks like a round coil. Very good. You plug it in, and it boils water in a cup. You don't need an urn or something. So the question only is, it only works with electricity, and it's not a Keilim. But no one says you're potter because you're cooking water. Because you're cooking water, you're chayiv. So if you see that an immersion heater, like many poskim, is chayiv because you're cooking water, so why is the sterno pan potter, you're cooking water? It's a very poshut. In the immersion heater, you want to use the water. But here, the water is heichatimtza. So it seems that a sterno, even the pan itself, is potter. Next question is a beautiful contemporary question that brings us to the yisoid in a most perfect way. And that's what's called, the proper name is a meat tenderizer. But the Hamish way of calling it is a schnitzel hammer. Sounds pretty different. Meat tenderizer, schnitzel hammer, but what's the difference? Lamaisa, some people have this, it looks like a small hammer, and you bang on the schnitzel. You're supposed to flatten it out so it tastes better, and whatever the reason is. And again, do you have to toivel that metal meat tenderizer? So this is mamish, achleikis, shach and taz. Nothing more perfect than that. because it's only used for raw, number one. Number two, it's not used for anything else. I mean, even a judge might use it, but it's too small, tiny little thing. So this is machlokes shach and taz. And that's why the poskim say the minig is to toivel it. If someone didn't toivel it, yasham yilismach, there is something b'seimechan. We have this the sheet of the shach plus the whole Ramah is toivel bracha, but that's the minig to toivel it below bracha. A poultry shear, again that's proper English. We call it a chicken scissors, but the word chicken scissors is in Slita. I'll explain to you in a moment. Poultry shear actually is a scissor that cuts raw chicken. Poultry is raw. Does that need tevila? That's like the shtat shechita. So the Ramah would say yes, b'lai bracha. The question is, would the shach agree to that? The answer is yes. You know why? Because people have a poultry shear that they use for cutting cooked chicken. So it's also understandable that we consider kli suda. So that's why lamaisa a poultry shear should be toiveled below bracha. A corkscrew, which basically is a metal keilim that takes out the cork, sounds like a real chiyuv, but has no chiyuv whatsoever. It doesn't make the wine. It doesn't even make the barrel. It's probably less of a chiyuv than the case of the mekadeach. Mekadeach at least is making a spout. It's touching a little bit of the wine. A corkscrew, to my knowledge, all agree is pata. The less, on the choshle, it's just taking out his cork. A cookie cutter, a metal cookie cutter. So it cuts shapes to make into cookies. So that's the same machlokes shach and taz. The only question here is, no one used a cookie cutter for any other purpose but for raw dough. If you tell me you use it to cut baked cake, no, then you tackle be chayav b'lai bracha. If you only use it for raw dough, it's machlokes shach and taz once again. The minig is like the taz to be toiveled b'lai bracha. A metal rolling pin. You have to toivel that. He's starting to make challah or pizza, whatever he wants a metal, not wood. So again, this is the same idea. It's used in conjunction with raw dough, inedible. It's a machlokes shach and taz, and if there's no other purpose, then just rolling it, you're not kli suda. The shach would hold its pata, the taz holds its chayiv, and the minig is to be choishish for the taz. Today it's very popular, the sourdough. So what's called a sourdough starter. Basically you put in the ingredients, you put it into a glass or plastic container. We're talking about a glass container. You close it and you keep it until you're ready to use it. So, a whole different shir, not for today. A kli oitza, where you storage things, is chayiv and tevila. But this might be even less of a chiyuv. Why is less of a chiyuv? Because it's not even like you're storaging fruits or vegetables. This sourdough is inedible. So even if it would be a kli for a sourdough, loitam aril, sakin shechit is pata. This is pata. So this would be even less than a regular kli oitza. If there's no use other than for sourdough, we do have the shach that holds it would be pata. Someone asked me a good question that was better than it sounds. A metal ice cube tray. Again, typically a plastic. I'm talking about a metal ice cube tray or an ice cream maker. So what's the shaila? You're making ice cubes. That's also an important food. But the question is, Dr. Shlomo Zalman in the Sefer Tevillas Keilim, it's Amud Reish Lamed Zayin. We don't find in the pasuk in the Gemara they had ice cubes. They didn't have it. Maybe it's only in conjunction with cooking. Who said an ice cube tray is considered kli suda? So Dr. Shlomo Zalman, it's not true, because it's lav dafik kli bishul. Cups and pitchers are also chayiv. If something is used to either make food or eat food or serve food, it's chayiv. This ice cube tray is made to make ice cubes, and he's convinced that avadi you toivel it even with a bracha. Even though it's a new phenomenon, they didn't have freezing, but what's the chiluk? The Shevet HaLevi points out that even though there's no problem of bliois, of tarfus in ice cube ice cube tray, but so what? That's not the criterion. It has to be a kli suda, and this would be a kli suda. What's the difference? You put it into water. What's the difference? It's an edible food. Okay, another question, a beautiful question, is an easy filter. So to remind you, a number of years ago, there was a discovery that there's bugs in the water. So, Lamaisa, the easy filter, people will not drink water if it's not filtered. So the easy filter is definitely machsher the mayim, prepares the water. The halacha is on a strainer, a colander, is chayiv and tevila. If it's a metal colander used to separate the lakshin from the water, and the lakshin is fully cooked, about the chayiv to toivel it. In fact, some places hold you toivel with a bracha. It's a kli suda. Others maybe feel that it's not a complete tikkun, the lakshin is made, it's just getting out of the water. But definitely a strainer that strains edible food is chayiv and tevila. If you have a strainer that you use for your barley that you soak in water, or beans you soak in water for the cholent, that's taka different, because that's raw. But if it's edible, the food that you strain is edible, it's chayiv and tevila. So, it should come out that a new, easy filter should be toiveled. And maybe if you never toiveled yours till now, you should toivel it. And the truth is, mitzad the hilchos achila shaboy, it's correct. An easy filter should need tevila. But here we come to a different angle. Zok derech hashulchan, in Sif Lametes, I see people have these big yoyros shel barzel that are attached to their home or their business, and they don't toivel them. It's it cooks water, it's real kli suda. Zok derech hashulchan, a kli suda that is attached to the ground or attached to the house is no longer a kli suda because it's not a keli. Mechubel karka loses shem keli in many other areas of halacha. So therefore, says derech hashulchan, this yoira is not a kli suda because it's not a kli. If it's not a kli, it can't be a kli suda. Now he's talking about a big yoira, a big vat, but the chutshani in Amud Reish Beis in a sefer on Amud Chav Beis in a sefer on Hilchas Tevillas Keilim, he has a different connection, and he wonders why we don't toivel a faucet. The water comes out in your kitchen in a faucet. Now it doesn't sound right, but why is it potter? So he says a very simple cheshbon. He says that why don't you have to toivel the pipes? Because the piping is, besides mechuba, the piping is bringing the water. It's not a kli suda. It's piping the water from the reservoir. So the faucet is part of the piping system. It's not a kli suda. Now according to this, there would be a good reason to say that an easy filter is chayiv and tevila. But as we said, if it's mechubal karka, that is enough of reason to pata. And Takai saw the Shevet Kasi, Chelek Dalet Siman Reish Zayin, who says that if it's not usable as it is, in other words, an easy filter is not a strainer. You can't use it on your own, just hold in your hand. You have to have it part of the sink. So an easy filter, although in its function is a kli suda, but if it's not a kli, it's not a kli suda. Someone had this shaila, he bought a pot, he toiveled the pot, that was the good news. He forgot to toivel the cover. So now he has a cover, a metal cover, to a metal pot, he didn't toivel it. Does he have to toivel it, number one? And number two, you make a bracha on the cover. So the emes is that in Hilchas Shabbos, we know putting a pot cover on the pot is bishul deraisa. It's mekar bishul in a very big way. It keeps the heat in, and it hastens the cooking process. That's an indication of what the pot cover is. Oy bazoi, it should also be chayiv and tefillah for that reason. But it's another cheshbon. And typically, especially a cholent, but many foods, if you cook it and it boils, so the food bubbles up, or the vapor bubbles up and hits the pot cover. So not only is it part of the cooking process, but even touches the food. And that's really part of a different shear, that touching the food is a very important criterion in Chiyuv Tevillas Keilim. So therefore, the poskim assume that a kisu kedera is chayiv in tevila. It's interesting. The Ramah in the same sifter that we began with, about the sakin shel shchita and the redel, Ramah says kisui kedera is chayiv in tevila. But a kisui you put on top of the bread that's baking is not chayiv in tevila. What's the chil the kisui kedera kisui pas? Pashit. Because the kisui pas that doesn't touch the food. And therefore, the Pri Chadash says this, the Aruch HaShulchan says this, that if a kisui kedera that touches the food, avada is chayiv and tefila, even with a bracha. The only question is, sometimes you have a pot that the food doesn't bubble up and touch the kisui. But it seems, Rabbi Yash says beferish, that the fact that it's part of the bishul process, it keeps the heat within, that's enough mechayiv tefila on a cover, even if it doesn't touch the food. So a pot cover is chayiv and tefila, even with the bracha. Of course, we should toivel together. One bracha goes for both. How about if you have a pot cover, let's say a cover, that it doesn't help for bishul because there's no bishul. It just keeps the food inside of it clean and sterile. For example, a honey dish. A glass honey dish is chayiv and tefila. It's a kli oichel. Do you have to toivel the honey dish cover? Zokta Aruch HaShulchan, no. If it's not cooking in it and doesn't touch the food at any time, it's not a kli oichel. There's a very nice tshuva in the Cheshav HaEphod, Chelik Beisim, and Tzadik Tes. He discussed the whole concept of kisui of a kedera, a kisui b'chlal, and he says, Midivrei kulam nilmad, a kisui that doesn't touch the food, it's just there as an hagana, that no dirt or debris should fall into it, is not chayiv in tevilas keilim. So here you have a case of a honey dish, that the dish is chayiv, but the cover is not chayiv. A beautiful question, Mamash Our Sugya, is a salt shaker. Number one. So typically, many salt shakers, the bottom is glass, and the cap is metal. So you have two chiyuva. Good. Is a salt shaker chayiv in tefila? Is a salt dish, a glass salt dish, you dip the challah into it, that chayiv? And the third question is a pepper shaker. You want to master the difference? So that's the geshmak of this question. Lamaisa, a salt shaker should be chayiv in tefila because midin Gemara and Shulchan Aruch, salt is an oichel. You make a bracha on salt if you eat it plain. Okay, people don't eat it plain, but you make a bracha on it. It's a regular oichel. So why should you need a tefila on a salt shaker? And indeed, in fact, I saw a bigger chiddush. If you have a salt crusher, let's say you have hardened salt, you have a special crusher that grinds the salt. It's also chayiv in tefila. Because amaisa, salt is edible. But here's the catch. The Shem Zalman in Mincha Shleima, Chelik Beis, Simon Samach Vav, the end of Sikot and Zayin, says a salt shaker is definitely chayiv and tefila like a regular kli oichel. But the question is, how about if you have a pepper grinder? Pepper in a peppercorn, the raw form, you grind that peppercorn. So this the Paiskim discuss, maybe it's not really an oichel, because pepper, there is no bracha we eat it plain. But the maisa, you use it in foods. So that's a big discussion if a pepper grinder is chayiv and tefila. Some hold yes, but there's some that are mekel. But the maisa, it has no shaykhs to our shayla. Because let's say you have a pepper shaker, which means you put in ground pepper into the shaker. You take it to the table, you add pepper. Why is that a kli oichel? If you want to say a pepper grind is part of, no, or not chayiv midaraisa, I could understand. Because you don't eat raw pepper. But in the pepper shaker, you pour it into the soup, whatever you want to do. So it's a food, and there's a kli food. And taka, there would be no difference between a salt shaker and a pepper shaker. Both require tefillah. They started selling, I didn't check up recently, but I know for a number of years they had a jar of spice, and a built-in grinder. Mamish, a built-in grinder. Do you have to toivel that grinder? So maybe the glass, if it's glass, the glass container is potter, because it's not really a keilim. It's basically like a shell, like a container for the food. We don't toivel the wine bottles, the grape juice bottle, because it's considered a shell. But a grate is a grater. So this was very challenging to me because I had to know the Metzias. I found a beautiful sefer on a number of volumes on Hilchas Kashrus, Imrei David, Hilchas Tevillas Keilim, page 73. So he did very good research, and he says, to his knowledge, at this point, maybe a few years ago, all of the disposable graters are made from plastic. Believe it or not. Truth is, unfortunately, we know from 9/11 that a sharp plastic could be very dangerous, could be very sharp. But his research is that all of these disposable graters on the top of a spice jar are made from plastic. No plastic is not chayav and tevila. So if you have to keep up to date, of course, but if they started making it with metal, that would be a problem. At least the top part should be chayav in tevilas keilim. Another beautiful question. Someone has a coffee grinder. He takes coffee beans, raw coffee beans, and he grinds them. Does he have to toivel that? And if yes, with a bracha. So you're wondering, what's the chiluk? We spoke about pepper grinders chayiv. So why is coffee different? So there's one obvious chiluk. Because pepper, after it's ground, is used in its raw state. Coffee grinder that grinds raw beans, even after it's ground, it can't be used. It has to be cooked. So how do you look at a coffee grinder? If you think about it, this is another example of shach and taz. And who says this besides you? Rabbi Kiva. On the page, on Sif Zayin, Rechayim shel pilpulin is chayiv, Zot Rabbi Kiva, but Rechayim shel coffee, lataz toiveled b'lei bracha, lashach ein tzarech tevila, v'lei chazi davar achar. So as I told you, that shach and taz gives us a lot of mileage in this sugya. The Yavitz, in Chelik Aleph, the end of Siman Samach Zayin, he assumes that a coffee grind is chayiv tefila with a bracha. That's the way it's understood. So the Pesachei Tshuva, in Sif Katan Ches says, why with the bracha? Toivel b'lei bracha. What is very surprising, the Pri Megadim and Archayim, Hilchos Pesach, Tafel Aleph, Sif Katan Vav, Mishptei Sahav, he says, Rechayim shel kava, l'shach, chayiv tefila, b'lei bracha. That's all he says. Now why is that true? Why, according to, does the Pri Megadim say the shach holds you chayiv b'lei bracha? The shach holds you pata. Oh, so some say it's a printing error. It should say taz, but they have all the new Shulchan Aruch. No one says that. So that's probably the right answer. That since the Maisa you could use this grind for other foods, very good. That's why it's even like the shach is chayiv. We mean say shach is chayiv and like the taz, certainly it's chayiv. An egg yolk brush that puts a raw egg yolk onto a challah. So if it's made of the material that's chayiv and tevilas keilim, then en echanami, there's a reason to toivel it. But it's more likely it's totally in shach and taz. Because this no one used for anything else, like the shach would be potter, like the taz, you'd be chayiv. A question that I thought was a joke, but it wasn't a joke, if you have an esrig box, esrig pushka, and you're planning on using your esrig after Sukkot to make esrig jelly, does it need tefila before Sukkot? That sounds strange. Because the Maisa, the esrig on Sukkot is not an oichel. The esrig is a mitzvah, a very expensive fruit. $500 a pound is pretty expensive, right? So how could you say Yechayiv in tefila? It's an oichel, but not now. Right now it's a kli mitzvah, not a kli suda. But I did see the Shevet HaKosi, Chelik, Dalid, Siman Reish Vav. He says, if you know in advance that every year you make esrig jelly, you have to toivel the esrig box. So if you like that chumrah, fine. To us it seems that it's not a kli oichel. Not a kli, it's only storage. It's not a kli oichel, it's a kli for a mitzvah. Next question, and this is Taka, another beautiful question. We spoke about Rosh Hashanah, the honey dish. Sukkot, now is Pesach's turn. Think about this objectively. You bought a new ca'ara. Do you have to toivel the ca'ara, the ca'ara to use on Pesach? So I'm talking about it was not made by Yid, that it's metal or silver, whatever it is, but it's chayiv and tevila mitzad, the material. The question is that true? So the truth is, there are different minhagim. Some people just put the food on the ca'ara and keep it there. They don't touch it. So why the chayiv and tevila? It's not a kli suda. It's made to keep it there, but not to eat. Some people put the food directly onto the ca'ara and take it off and eat that, whatever it is, the morah, the zera, whatever it is. So it's a regular kli suda. Chayiv and tevila, the chayiv the bracha. Some people keep the food in a glass dish, and on that, they put that on the ca'ara. So then, enechanami, the glass dish is chayiv and tevila, and the ca'ara is pata. It never touched the food. That's the right approach for this shayla. So the only point that someone asked me is, but does it make sense? Yechayiv, it's not really a food, it's a mitzvah. But I didn't find such a chilik. If you eat the maror, if you eat the zraya, if you eat the beya, why isn't it a food? Because it's a mitzvah. No one says that's svar. In fact, the ca'ara that holds the matzah should be chayiv and tevila. If you have a special plate for the matzah, why are you chayiv and tevila? So that's basically the aside. A ca'ara that is made by a guy should have tevilas keilim. A really challenging question is the koishel Eliyahu. So you think about it, it's a little intriguing because we don't have anything like this the rest of the year. Some people have the minig, they fill up the koishel Eliyahu before that time of the seder. After the seder, they pour the wine back into the decanter. Never use it. So why is it chayiv and tevilas keilim? Taka, it's a kli suda, it's a cup made by a guy, but it's not being drunk, it's not being consumed. Oh, wait. I'm talking about those that put it right back. So someone said, yeah, but it's kli oitza. It's storage of the wine. But that's not true. The wine was very comfortable in the bottle. You put it in the kais for the mitzvah. It's not kli oitza, it's not storage. So I think it makes sense. The kais Eliyahu that is not used at all, you put it back, there's no chiyuv. I saw the poskim say this. If you use the wine for kiddush the next morning, like some do, and I must mention you have to cover the kais. You leave wine overnight, not because of gilui, because it's inferior quality wine. So if you use the wine the next morning, then you have to toivel it because it's a regular kli. It's preparing for the next morning. The question is, some people have the minig that they pour from the koishel into all the kaisais for the fourth kais. Then the koishel is like a pitcher. It's like a Pesach night pitcher. And for that reason it should be toiveled. So again, everything has to just stem with the original yisoid. Another question that is not funny because all the poskim discuss it, and that is for those that have dentures, false teeth, does that require tevila? So we're talking about that the material is, of course, the metal base of it, or the glass content in the teeth itself. So the truth is, for those that need it, ein lecha kli suda g'dola mizu. It grinds the food, it crushes the food, it makes eating possible. But the only issue here is that can we call it a kli suda? And I'll give you an edel svarah, it's an emes svarah. On Shabbos, you're not allowed to make toichen or lush, but you could eat food. You're crushing the food. You're making toichen or lush. The teretz is in the food in the mouth. That's not a melacha. Derech achila it's called. So just like with one's own teeth, there's no chi of tevila. Of course, it's not shaykh, but the dentures are not a kli suda. It's part of the person. And if he could use his teeth to crush something, he could use dentures. So Shlomo Zalman in Minchas Shloimeh, Chelik Beis, Amav has another svara, a really interesting svara. And he says, there's no keli in the world that you can't share with others, like dentures. That's what he says. If you can't share it with others, it's not a keli. Some say also another svara that this is a very lumdish svara. The Shevet Kosi Chelik Vav Reish Sadik Aleph. He points to a Mishnah in the Goyim. Perikut Gimel Mishnah Tes. If you walk into a house carrying a ring, a beged, so the item will tell me right away. But if you're wearing it, it's bottled to the person. Has a different halach in Hilchos Tumah. Bottled to the guf or separate. He says if you're wearing dentures, it's not a kli. It's bottled to the person. So there are a few good svaras that it's bottled to the guf. It's not a keli. You can lend it to someone. And also in Hilchos Shabbos Shaboy, it doesn't have a shem, a kli, toichin or boira. So too in Hilchos Tevillas Keilim. The next question is also unprecedented, but for us it's a very geshmaka shayla to look into, and that is a meat thermometer. So they didn't have meat thermometers in those days, that's for sure. But the question is a meat thermometer that you put into the meat, is that chayiv and tefila? So it sounds pretty much of a chayiv because it touches the food, and it's there when the meat is being cooked or baked. However, think about it closely, it doesn't make sense. Because the meat thermometer is doing nothing in the preparation of the food. The food is cooking very well. It tells you when to close the fire. So very good. Does that mean that if you buy a timer, that after 30 minutes it rings to close the oven, you have to toivel the timer? If someone uses a clock to know when to close the roast, you have to toivel the clock? It's basically a mesa maineya in a very real way. So it's touching the food, that's true, but it's not being machsheh the oichel in any given way. It's one big mesa maineya. It's avoiding being dried or burnt. So that's the chayr pashit. But there's a big kasha on this, because we find the Pri Megadim in the Chas I mentioned earlier, Taf Nav Sid and Vav, who says beferish, if you have a scale that you weigh foods, and as a metal tray, you have to toivel the scale tray, because the food goes on it. What do we see? That something that measuring food is chayiv and tefila. Dakei tshuva and sivkat yud gimel, and this is pashit, a glass measuring cup or metal measuring cup. How do you have to toivel it? Because the food goes into it. So now you could ask: so if a measuring cup and a scale is chayiv, so why a meat thermometer pata? But think about it, it's very pashit. Because the measuring cup, the food goes into it, and you measure it, you take off with it, and then you pour it into the pot. That's part of the achila. The scale also, you add to it to make the right amount, you take off, and it goes right into the achila. But this is a mesa maineya. Talking about Befelder in his sefer, it's Amos Samach Gimel, says this very distinction, that a kli suda does not apply to a meat thermometer. It does apply to a scale and a measuring cup. Now someone asked me, but l'maisa, another reason it should be pata is because the meat is still raw. But that's not a svar, because it's getting cooked. Now another point about this meat thermometer, the Mechaber says in Siv Zayin, this is interesting, a funnel. For example, you have a big jug of olive oil. You want to put it into a small container. So the funnel helps pour from a big jar to a smaller jar. So the Mechaber says, the Shulchan Aruch says, a funnel that's of the right materials, chayiv and tefila. So what do you see? That a funnel like this is chayiv and tefila. It's not doing anything, but it's helping in the transfer. So what about a meat thermometer? But that's not a dimion at all. A funnel touches the food on both sides, and it helps using the food right now. It doesn't spill on the floor. But a meat thermometer does nothing in the preparation of the food. It's just basically to avoid burning. And last but not least, I'll leave you with an interesting shayla. Punk this Erev Shabbos, I noticed in our house we have a chaynik, like many people have, a tea bag. You put a tea bag in, or two, you add hot water, and it basically gets hot, and you put it onto the blech, and it keeps it warm. Is a chaynik, a new chaynik, made metal of course, chayiv and tevilas Keilim. Because at the end of the day, after you make the tea bags in the chainik, you don't drink plain tea essence. It's not edible as it is. You have to add water. So maybe we'll say that the chainik is something like raw meat, like the Naril's raw meat, and is not chayiv, at least with chayiv b'lei bracha, because no one drinks plain yeast tea essence. So that sounds intimidating, but it's wrong, and I'll tell you why. Because pepper grind yoichiach. The Ramah says in Siv Zayin that pepper grinds chayiv and tefila. You don't eat it after it's ground. The teretz is, here the criterion is if it's completely processed, if you did what you're supposed to do. The pepper is supposed to be ground in the pepper grind, fine. No one uses plain tea, I understand. But is the tea bag completely cooked? Is it the way it's supposed to be? Yes. That's why it's chayiv. And the biggest raya is, why is a kumkum, why is an urn chayiv and tefila? No one drinks plain water, hot water, but it's a pasuk in the Torah, right? The Gemara says kumkum is chayiv and tefila. Teretz is, if this keli makes the full preparation, that's chayiv. So a tea essence, kumkum is chayiv tefila with a bracha. So to a kettle, that's the final preparation. I can talk to you all. Uh-oh. No. Little cash.
Why do you have to kasha a percolator? Toivel a percolator. You don't
Shame Irgen Shear, Torah like the biggest Yakov, Rabbi Smith for today's shear. As a Shem after Kaddish to the Sikkim. To have the great sponsor of shear, call Irgen Shear Torah 718-851-8651 or email ist to shiva.com. Chananya van Akasha Oimer. Otzakesh Baruch Hu Zakas is a selfie him to a mitzvah shenem al noy chofes of an sidka yagdol tevila. Rabbi said there's some salad that's kind of prepared in the back. It's on these aluminum pans that don't need tefila. One-use, single-use only pans.
Okay, just let's chazar we learned today. First of all, the chiyav is kli suda, based on the pasuk. That's why a scissors is potter. But lav dafka using heat, even a cup, even a pitcher, is chayiv and tefila. A can opener is potter from tefila. A nutcracker should be toiveled. Apple core should be toiveled. A trivet, a spoon rest are not kli suda. They are kli, not chayiv and tefila. A sakin shel shchita, the mechab holds is potter, the Ramah holds is chayiv v'lei bracha. The Shach and Taz argue about a radel, if it's chayiv, because you don't use a radel in any other context. But the minig olim is like the Taz, that if indeed it's a touch of the food and does some type of preparation, like a radel, should be toiveled. A napkin holder, a sterno pan, a potter from tefila, it's not a kli suda. A meat tenderizer, poultry shear, should be toiveled below bracha. A corkscrew is potter l'choladeis, it's opening a cork but not the bottle, it's not the wine. A blade of electric knife should be toiveled. A rolling pin should be toiveled below bracha. Ice cube tray, ice cube maker should be toiveled even with the bracha. Easy filter does not require tefila. Pot cover, if it's the right material, should be toiveled with the bracha. Just to keep clean, the mashal honey dish cover does not need tefila because it's not machshir the food anyway. Salt and pepper shaker, if it's the right material, should be toiveled. The disposable spice dish that have a greater ace ata, almost all of them are plastic. You should know the metzias. A coffee grind, tefila b'lei bracha. Eskrik pushka, I don't think it should be toiveled. Ca'ara, glass dish, you have to toivel. If you touch the food, touches the actual ca'ara and you eat from it, then even the caiרה itself should be toiveled. Koishel probably is better to toivel it because you might end up using it. Dentures, the minig is not to toivel it. A meat thermometer is not no chi of tevila. Measuring cup and a scale does need tevila. A tea chainik, a kettle, an urn, since it does the final preparation of the water, etc., that does need tevila.